well today. And I hope that you'll be able to speak to some of our colleagues about the issues. And it really represents a shift in, I guess, in many levels between not only Israel, but also the Jewish people and the whole dynamics in the region for the best, for a better future. So it's wonderful that you're here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Today we have Dr. Robert Satloff. He's the executive director of the Washington Institute. And before I read this,
Don't read it.
It's only 20 minutes.
Don't read it.
So I also want to say that Rob is also one of the directors of ISGAP. And he's an old friend. We met actually at this university in 1988 when we were 4 years old. And he's been a friend, and not only a friend, but really, I think, a mentor and an example of somebody who took a small center, the Washington Institute, and over the decades really built it into the premier think tank research center in Washington on issues of the Middle East and policy. So it's amazing that you're here, and thank you for schlepping all the way to be with us. It's appreciated. So Rob is the executive director of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. He oversees all the Institute's operation and leads the organization's team of Middle East scholars, experts, and policy practitioners. He also holds the Institute Howard Berkowitz Chair in U.S. Middle East Policy. He's an expert on Arab and Islamic politics, as well as the Middle East policy in the U.S. Robert has written and spoken widely on Arab-Israeli peace process, the challenges of political Islam, and the need to revamp U.S. efforts to conduct public diplomacy in the Middle East. Soon after the September 11th attack in the United States, Rob and his family moved to Morocco, to Rabat, and spent 2 years there, and he traveled throughout the Middle East and Europe, writing extensively on ways to inject urgency and ideas into the ideological campaign to fight radical political Islam. And of course, there's a lot of overlap to the interests and mission of ISGAP on this issue, because anti-Semitism plays a key role in driving the ideology. And this is a topic he's written in a book, and his book is entitled The Battle of Ideas and the War on Terror, Essays on U.S. Public Diplomacy in the Middle East, which was published by the Washington Institute. Rob is also, he wrote a very important seminal work on the issues of the Holocaust in North Africa and Morocco, which was a chapter of the Holocaust that was often overlooked, and spent time finding righteous Gentiles, Muslims in North Africa that helped Jews to survive the Holocaust. He's been at this for a long time. Today, Rob's talk is building a virtuous cycle, Arab-Israeli peace building, the Abraham Accords, and the fight against anti-Semitism. Thank you for being here on the floor.
So first of all, thank you very much, Charles. As Charles just said, he and I knew each other when I was taller and he didn't have gray hair. And that goes back quite a while. And I just want to congratulate you, Charles, for everything that you have done. It's an enormous accomplishment to create the world's foremost academic institution dedicated to anti-Semitism. And so, really, congratulations. I also want to just apologize in advance. I flew last night, got here a couple hours ago, and I'm a little tired. So if I'm more incoherent than usual, please, your forbearance. What I want to talk about begins with this. When it comes to questions of Jews, Israel, Jews in the Middle East, Jews around the world, we're passing through a moment of intense cognitive dissonance. Take, for example, this set of questions. What country, at least according to my own unofficial headcount, has the fastest growing Jewish population in the world? What country is the most recent to have an official event on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, addressed at a ministerial level? What is the most recent country to sign a free trade accord with Israel? What country has hosted Israel's president, prime minister, foreign minister, and about half its cabinet in just the past year? The answer to all those questions is the United Arab Emirates. And then there is another set of questions that goes like this. What country registered its highest number of anti-Semitic acts in 2021? A 34% increase over the previous year. What country had a 59% increase in anti-Jewish hate crimes last year over the previous year? What country's past and potentially future president has decried Israel's, quote, absolute power over the national legislature? What country's governing party includes representatives that condemn Israel as an apartheid state and whose loyal opposition includes members who have likened the COVID vaccine mandate to Nazi persecution? The answer to all those questions is the United States. Of course, we shouldn't get carried away with this juxtaposition of questions. For those of you who know the term, the Emirates is not yet the Golden Medina, nor is America even remotely the Weimar Republic. But facts are stubborn things, and this little quiz reminds us not to presume that the way things were are the way things always will be. So that's a context for me to jump into something far more personal, which is my own experience with Holocaust education, Holocaust awareness, and Holocaust recognition in the Arab world, a mission to which I've dedicated much of my own psychic energy and personal effort over the last 20 years. And so what I'd like to do in the balance of my time is actually tell much more of a personal story that I think has resonance for the political world in which we live. And it ends up, here's a cut to the chase very quickly, it ends up with the idea of there being a virtuous circle, which the Middle East is now in, something that we need to feed, a virtuous circle of states, institutions, leaders, and peoples, all beginning at different pace in different ways, all beginning to do something absolutely remarkable. Certainly absolutely remarkable for the modern Arab world, which is to not only to come to grips with, but in some sense to reconcile, become aware, engage, and embrace Holocaust history and the relevance of this in the current world. And for me, this is an enormous step forward from where the region used to be and where one hopes it would be going. So let me tell you a little bit of the story. As Charles said, I moved with my family to North Africa 20 years ago this year. And I spent 2 years traveling around the Middle East, unearthing stories of Arabs who saved Jews during the Holocaust, which is a bit of a man bites dog quest. And the purpose of this was very simple. That we Jews, we Westerners, historically have had at that time a well-meaning but totally failed way of talking with Arabs about the Holocaust. It was historically one of two ways. Either we told the distant story that had no relevance to people of this part of the world. The distant story of European fascists attempting to exterminate European Jewry, which was sort of interesting but not very relevant. Or we, and I mean major Jewish institutions, professors, whatever, we would recite in front of Arab groups and leaders a litany of the most absurd, extreme, and insulting things that we read, saw, or heard in Arab popular culture that was insulting about the Holocaust. Holocaust denial, Holocaust distortion, Holocaust celebration, as it were, and shame our the people with whom we were talking into promising to do better, which was sort of self-satisfying but not very effective. I see someone nodding over here. I'm sure you've heard these lectures in years past. So anyway, that's what triggered my own effort to try to find a different way to talk to Middle Easterners about this. Fortunately, I found what I was looking for. Not to spoil that great story, but the bottom line of that research is that my conclusion is that proportionately there are as many rescuers, there are as many righteous in the Middle East, in Arab countries, as there were in Europe. Basically, if there were 6 million Jews killed in Europe, and Yad Vashem has recognized approximately 27,000, I may be off by 1,000 here or there, for the number that died in Arab lands, a number, thankfully, which is much, much smaller because the war ended 2 years earlier, and it was thankfully on the other side of the Mediterranean from where the Nazis and their allies were most able to kill Jews, a number that was only about 4,000 or 5,000. The proportion of Arabs who saved Jews, let alone those that just helped Jews, but the proportion is almost exactly the same, and perhaps even higher. So that message is something that I've been able to tell Arab audiences in lectures around the Middle East, from Morocco to Tunisia to Jerusalem to Jordan, and more recently in the Gulf. A year after my book came out, I delivered the first set of lectures in Arabic on the Holocaust in Cairo, which was quite an experience, highly unusual experience, to give this set of lectures about what happened to Jews in Arab lands and the role that Arabs played in them, to audiences at think tanks and universities. But one episode stands out more than all, which, because it was so unique, it bears repeating. There's an Egyptian diplomat that people around the table may have heard of. His name is Amr Moussa. Amr Moussa was the head of the Arab League, the Egyptian foreign minister for many years. I think it's fair to say that among his many attributes, Amr Moussa is no Ohev Tzion. Amr Moussa is, no one is ever going to accuse Amr Moussa of being a lover of Zion. But yet, he will always have a soft spot for me, because in 2007, when I was about to go to Cairo, I wrote Amr Moussa a note with the preposterous request that he convened for me all the ambassadors of the Arab League, and that I deliver a lecture to them on the Holocaust in the Arab world and the importance of Holocaust education and genocide awareness for Arab governments. I thought he'd laugh me out of the room, but actually he said, "Rob, show up Tuesday." And I didn't know what to expect. Amr Moussa had distributed an invitation to all the ambassadors of the Arab League that I was coming to deliver a talk on the Middle East peace process. And so they were all sitting in a room, not unlike this. They have a big horseshoe-shaped table like the Security Council in New York. And they were all there, the ambassadors of every single Arab state, the Saudis, the Syrians, you name it, they were all there. And Amr Moussa introduces me, and then instead of giving the lecture about the Middle East peace process, I gave a lecture about what happened in Arab countries during the Holocaust and why it's important for them to learn this lesson and why they need to become part of the global discussion of genocide awareness. Well, you should have seen this table have a collective set of cardiac arrests. The Saudi ambassador turned red. The Syrian ambassador literally was holding his heart. But after some outrage and outbursts and people screaming, we then had a 2-hour conversation about this topic. That was, I'm sure it was the first and only and perhaps last time that it occurred in this room, but it was a step. It was a small step forward. And I thought then that, if you get the opportunity to have this set of discussions, face to face, openly, honestly, candidly, it can happen. And so that's what kept me that's one of the things that kept me forward and going for many years. 2 years later, I made a documentary with PBS on this topic. It got translated into Arabic and was shown throughout Arab countries. It became a rather popular film about this topic. About the same time, I began a partnership with the U.S. Holocaust Museum, which became quite interested in expanding its writ to this part of the world. In 2009, we reached the first ever official agreement with an Arab country, the government of Morocco, on archival education and exchange, which was televised by the Moroccans, the signing ceremony. We had exchanges with the Tunisians, and we began to do things around the Middle East. But still, it was an uphill battle. Still, governments, and because of governments, public institutions like universities and media remained wary of deep engagement on this topic. And then about 2017, things began to change. You can date it for a lot of different ways and different places. My own personal experience was in 2017, after having done this for quite some time, when on a visit to Saudi Arabia, I met a gentleman who had just been appointed the Secretary General of the Muslim World League, named Sheikh Mohammed Alisa. And in conversation with him, he seemed different than many of the previous government officials that I have met who were tasked to deal with Jews, Jewish issues, these sorts of things. And so after meeting him in late 2017, I wrote him a note in January of 2018 saying, Dr. Alisa, Holocaust Remembrance Day is coming up at the end of the month, the International UN-sanctioned Holocaust Remembrance Day. Would you be interested in writing a statement on this day? And I expected back, a bland, brief, anodyne statement of sort of recognition drawing straight from the UN resolution on the topic. And instead, I got back a 650-word essay, which was the clearest, most definitive, most authoritative denunciation of Holocaust denial and distortion that a senior Muslim religious figure had ever issued. It was absolutely remarkable. And I figured, something is going on here when the head of the Muslim World League, an institution that for the previous 40 years was responsible more than any other institution for the export and distribution of the most venomous anti-Semitic Jew hatred around the world, the dissemination of millions of dollars to Muslim religious institutions to spread the sort of hatred that that gave rise to horrible events in countries around the world. Something had changed when the head of that institution was now doing a 180 on one of the core questions on which side are you on the question of reconciliation, acceptance, awareness of these issues. 2 months later, I invited Dr. Elisa to Washington, took him on a tour of the Holocaust Museum with the director of the Holocaust Museum, and then later that year, the following year, he himself took 60 Muslim religious figures on a pilgrimage to Auschwitz, which, if you haven't seen the photographs and film, it's quite a remarkable and moving episode. And it symbolized this beginning of a change. Now, changes are happening in the Middle East in the last 5 years on many levels: strategic, political, military. We can go into all of that. I'm just focusing on this lens as a lens to look at the type of change that is so relevant for this group. How one deals with Jews, engagement with, welcoming, or on the other side, hatred of. And so what I saw with Dr. Elisa's experience is actually something which was beginning to spread to countries around the Middle East. Now, of course, the Abraham Accords in the summer of 2020 was a huge boon for this, was a huge fillip for this effort, not just on the political strategic level, but on this level too. And I say that as somebody who has a foot in both arenas. In addition to the work that I do as a director of the Washington Institute, I'm also vice chair of the U.S. Holocaust Museum's Commission on Antisemitism and State-Sponsored Holocaust Denial, actually. Holocaust denial and state-sponsored anti-Semitism. And we do quite a bit of work around the Middle East. And I have traveled with the museum to many of these Middle Eastern countries. And what we have seen in the last couple of years is a remarkable incremental process of countries seeing what other countries are doing and wanting to not be the last to make a step forward, and wanting to see how country X is pushing the envelope, which opens up space for country Y to do something that country Y may never have thought of doing. So, for example, at one end of the spectrum, the Moroccans are off embracing Holocaust education as part of the national curriculum, and the king saying, one has to have amnesia if one cannot recognize the role of, the Holocaust in modern history. On the other end of the spectrum, just this past January, I was fortunate to play a role in arranging a ministerial level Holocaust remembrance event in the United Arab Emirates, with the Minister of Culture giving an official statement on behalf of the government on this. And that event opened up the arena for other events to occur around the Middle East. And last January as well, I was fortunate to arrange something which I thought would never happen, which is the first ever Holocaust remembrance event in Cairo, Egypt, which, despite a country that has had more than 40 years of peace with Israel, is also a country that has frozen the human aspect of peacemaking throughout those 40 years, and actually it's regressed in many respects over those 40 years on the people-to-people human level. But yet, this happened in a 5-star Cairo hotel on the banks of the Nile, with the Egyptian head of the Human Rights Commission present, and other prominent Egyptians and foreign diplomats. An enormous, something I never dreamed would be possible. And so when you think about, where we are today, whether it's in Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, the Gulf, we would have had a Holocaust remembrance event in Riyadh as well if there hadn't been a COVID surge in Riyadh last January, and we're working to plan that right now. Each of these countries are looking at the other and are seeing this is where they want to be. And, they know their own limits. What you can do in the Emirates, you can't yet do in Cairo, but what you can do in Cairo today is what you couldn't do in Cairo 10 years ago. And that is in of itself a great step forward. Some countries aren't there yet. I'm hopeful that Jordan begins to go down this path, a country we like to put in the camp of moderation and openness, but on this issue and dealing with Jews, the Jordanians still have a ways to go. I'm hoping that they make progress. Other countries are making enormous progress. Certainly the Bahrainis are there, and they see what is happening in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and every country is looking over their shoulder. They don't want to be last, and they want to see how far they can go. To me, this is a moment of great opportunity, great hope. Now, I want to put a note of caution in here. I don't want us by any means to suggest that that the forces in the opposite direction have thrown in the white towel. They haven't. They're there. They remain significant. So even in a place like Saudi Arabia, we saw two sides of the coin in just the last 6 weeks, where on the one hand, the king of Saudi Arabia had that same Dr. El Issa deliver the most significant sermon of the year for Muslims. The Hajj sermon on Yom al-Arafat during the Hajj. And he was attacked throughout the Muslim world as being the Zionist imam. How could the king of Saudi Arabia appoint the Zionist imam to deliver the most significant sermon of the year for the world's Muslims? But he did. And it helped legitimize all the other things that he and others around the Middle East are doing in this sphere. Regrettably, about 2 weeks ago, a key imam at the Grand Mosque in Mecca gave an alternative, very hateful khutbah, very anti-Semitic khutbah, that was also on Saudi television. Not the global Hajj audience, but yet not nothing, as we like to say. So there are forces in different directions. The enemies of this are out there. The critics are out there. And I recognize them, and we need to take them on. But my message really is one of opportunity, one of engagement, and one about the need for candor. In my humble experience, and I'm going to close with this, my humble experience doing this for 20 years, talking to thousands and thousands of Muslims and audiences from the Atlantic to the Gulf, the most important thing is candor. It is do not try to patronize one's audience. Do not try to suggest that you know better about their lot than they do, but deal with them where they are. Engage them on the facts. Engage them person to person. And I am confident that there are people of goodwill in every one of these Arab countries that want to partner, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because they know that the enemies of this are also the enemies of them. that those forces in society that want to shut down open, candid, engaged discussion of things like Holocaust history, Holocaust awareness, that sort of thing, are the same forces in society which want to impede progress on every other aspect of reform and openness that these countries want to pursue. And so they're our allies. And our goal is to find them, nurture them, encourage them, and work with them. And if we do, I think that in the long run, we can help put anti-Semitism in the Arab world back in the box, back in the bottle where it belongs. And then we can focus on the far more difficult challenge of anti-Semitism back in our own societies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. So we're going to have Q&A for a bit, and then Dr. Alali will speak. But I think, Daphne, you have to set up something with the computer in the meanwhile.
The battery is low.
This battery is low. I don't even know if it's working here. I don't know if it's
You have
plugged
to
in.
set up something for the computer. So while you set up, we'll do Q&A with Rob. Deidre?
Thank you so much for that. I found it fascinating. I've just completed a project that's an online educational resource for teaching about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, and we included a section on the Holocaust in the Arab-Muslim world and responses afterwards. And in researching it, I was struck by just the discussions that are happening in these countries that you're talking about. And I just wanted to ask a very kind of like insider question, which is how important is it in the countries you were talking about in terms of Holocaust remembrance, education, scholarship, that the Holocaust scholarship has shifted to really take more seriously what happened in the Middle East and North Africa and those kinds of questions? Or is that just, we feel good about the fact that we've moved the scholarship in that way? Is it actually impactful? Is that driving some of this openness at all, or sustaining it in any way? So
it's an interesting question, and the answer is not the same everywhere. One of the things that one learns if one spends a lot of time in the Middle East is that the terms that I used earlier about Arab world actually is a false term. It's a term that Arabs and Westerners want to use when it's convenient to use them, but it's also a term that people throw away and people criticize when it is when it doesn't apply. So what do I mean? So look, where was Holocaust history in the Middle East? It was essentially in North Africa, with a little bit in Syria and Lebanon, and then we can have an interesting discussion about Iraq, which I think was a slightly different story. But there was no Holocaust history really in the Emirates or Saudi Arabia or most of the Gulf. And so when I gave a lecture on this to the diplomatic academy in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates, they were all very interested. But then, somebody said, "Why do I need to know this? It's not my history. It's the history of those Arabs, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Libya. It's not my history." And they were pointing out that in this case, Arab world doesn't apply. They're Emiratis, and that's very far away. And actually what we're seeing in the Middle East right now is state interests are trumping sort of pan-Arab interests, to the nth degree. That said, there's another phenomenon, which is most Arabs don't know their own history. In most Arab countries, history is so politicized, it is dangerous to write history books about one's own history. So just for argument's sake, take Tunisia. You can't write a serious history in Tunisia about the Bourguiba years, because it is so controversial given what happened afterwards. History in a lot of these countries ended a long time ago. You can't really write a good history in Egypt of the Nasser years or of the Sadat years. You just can't do it. It's very controversial. So let alone they don't even most of them don't know. It's not a critique. It's just the sources aren't there. It's very politicized. So someone like me comes in to explain history a little bit earlier, and it's a tabula rasa. So many Arabs are interested, but you have to appreciate national differences and appreciate this tension between pan-Arab and national interest.
Do the righteous Muslims narratives play into this?
Yes, actually, I do. I do think that the righteous Muslim narrative matters. It's not a panacea. So, for an example, when I did I was at the program in Egypt. What the Egyptians really wanted to know was how come I didn't give a speech about Egyptian Jews and their experience, and it's a great story, and the fear that Egyptian Jews had in 42 and 43 that they were about to be overrun by Rommel, and actually what happened domestically, because there were all these sort of pro-fascist forces within Egyptian society that were expecting the Nazis to defeat the British and take over Egypt. And it was a very complex story. And so they wanted their story,
Yes.
which is different than the story, the main story. And so everybody wants their story, which I think is terrific. And we should help provide it because they're thirsting for their story. And if the more we can do to provide it, I think that's a great gift. I'm sorry for talking so long. Here, go ahead.
Quick question here.
Okay, hi, thank you so much. I'm doing something in my small way similar in a different population, and I see you as a model, so I'll try to keep it short. How much do you worry that you're engaged in what is essentially a reputation laundering for some people who are dishonest? When do you worry that you're not actually engaged in a true relationship of parity, that you're actually being seen as an equal?
Who's the dishonest person in this?
Somebody who may be engaged in for instance, a visit to Auschwitz, of
Uh-huh.
all places, but who may go home and not really put in action what you would like him to do. Are they willing to let you into schools, for example? Are they changing curricula? And I know they want to tell their good stories, but are they willing to tell their stories when they're ugly?
Yeah. So it's a very good question. I'll give you sort of the telegraphic answer. Most of these countries don't want to talk about sins of the past. You know, they don't really want to talk about past funding in the 60s, 70s, and 80s for radical imams or madrasas or whatever. They prefer not to discuss it. What they are very willing to talk about, curriculum today, and there are organizations that follow this very closely, and actually reports have just come out which are extremely praiseworthy of the Emiratis, very, though not completely praiseworthy of the Saudis, definitely moving, galloping in the right direction, but not quite there yet where you would want them to be. So there's definitely, tangible progress that is being made. I will say this. I have no idea what's in someone's heart. I have no idea what's in someone's mind. And frankly, I don't care what's in someone's heart and mind. I care what comes out of their mouth, and I care what they do. And if they take the right actions, and if they say the right things, and if they become and if they set a new standard for what appropriate behavior and appropriate positions are supposed to be, that's great, and I'm perfectly happy. And if they go home and, in their heart of hearts, they still have, terrible thoughts about this, that, or the other, it's not what, I don't really care. I care about what the practical impact is on how societies are seeing issues of Jew hatred or Jew embracing, as it were.
Thank you. So Christine and then Rabbi Abad.
Hi, there has been in recent years an explosion of Holocaust centers in many, many parts of the world. And I wonder what your level of concern is about the weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, between the understanding of the Holocaust from the side of universality as opposed to specificity.
Yeah.
And how you see that.
Well, this is a much broader question. It's basically if you want to put it in a nutshell, it's the difference between how Yad Vashem and the U.S. Holocaust Museum approaches the question. Yad Vashem more, what's the word? Focused on the uniqueness of the. It's not the unique. It's not the right way of saying it, actually, because they're both focused on the uniqueness of the Jewish tragedy, but it's which lesson do you draw from it, and but they do take a different approach, but it's not 180-degree different. It's more of a 90-degree difference in how they do it. So I think I think there's room for both. It's about the particularistic focus on the specific Jewish tragedy and the universal lesson that we need to take from this, not just about the vulnerability of Jews, but about the urgency of preventing genocide wherever it exists.
I totally agree. I just wanted to make sure that both are represented, and it also impacts in particular on the curriculum.
Yes, I agree completely.
Thank you. Rabbi Abad.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Satloff, for expressing so eloquently the changes that are occurring in the Gulf, changes that I have experienced, as I mentioned before, personally in the last 2 years, and with the presence of my dear friend, Dr. Ali. So nice to see you here with us. We have been together in several conferences that he invited me to speak, so this is a demonstration of that welcoming and embrace that we have received there. There's the issue of the Holocaust. I can understand that many of the Arab countries, and maybe justifiably say, it's something that really did not pertain to us, or we didn't do anything, and didn't affect us much. But there is one issue that I think it should be brought more to the knowledge of the world, and that is the expulsion, persecution of almost 1 million Jews that lived in 10 Arab countries, namely Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Aden, where they did have a very, very hands-on participation, either expelling them, imprisoning them, depending on whatever each country did, persecuting them, taking away their citizenship. So I think it's important maybe to bring that first, and then to go next to the Holocaust recognition.
So actually, I take a somewhat different view, which is not to belittle in any way the significance of the issue you just raised. I think it's most useful to focus. I think there's a great utility, put it this way, in focusing on the Holocaust, not just because it happened in this, that, or the other country, because you cannot understand the world today. You cannot understand the world today if you don't appreciate the Holocaust. You don't understand what Putin is doing in Ukraine. You don't understand the concept of denazification. And today we have Arab countries on the Security Council voting on issues regarding Ukraine, and how can they possibly vote on this if their diplomats don't even know what the word denazification means? If we don't understand that the word genocide, which is occurring in the world today, began with the Holocaust, if we don't appreciate that the Human Rights Convention, which defines so much of the challenge we face around the world, was born out of the Holocaust, if we don't appreciate the Holocaust as the global event, seismic global event that it was, with Jews being the canary in the global coal mine, then none of these countries, whether or not they had the Holocaust experience in those countries, none of them can effectively engage in the world today. And that's why I focus on this, which again is not to derogate the very important point and the very important story that you just underscored.
Felix.
Thank you again for a very informative lecture.
Felix, before you go on, I just want to interrupt. Dr. Aziz, what is happening with Dr. Al-Ali's presentation?
No, everything is good. We just
We're ready?
doing the video.
So we can go ahead.
How much more time?
It's short one.
Okay.
You have time, you can.
It's ready.
Okay, please let me know. It's ready now?
It's ready.
Okay, so Felix, please ask your question. We'll have a concise response and we'll turn the floor.
Fantastic. Thanks for the honor. So I was really thanking you for a presentation which has raised quite a lot of new things, especially since also part of my subjectivity brings me even more attention when you're talking about Northern Africa, apart from my continent. Back to the issue of maybe your research on the writers. From psychological perspective, of course, we know that probably many of us don't like to be told how wrong we are on many levels. Sometimes it helps when we are told how right in some areas we are before we are told how wrong we are somewhere else. Back maybe to the question of how much that part of the story is really important in anti-Semitism education, but also Holocaust education, generally speaking, but also in that part of the world. Because increasingly I'm from Rwanda, and have seen increasingly how the story of the writers helps a little bit digest certain given things that were not digested before, especially when you have increasingly in commemoration periods, a survivor telling the story, but also next, most of the time, immediately, the writers telling the story of what happened. How much that is, but also how much that should be used in let's say, anti-Semitism fighting.
Yeah, look, it's a couple of things. One, it's a very important part of the story because it helps people open a door to the story. It is not the whole story. Actually, if you want to read my book or see my movie, half my book and half my film are about the dark side of what happened and the dark role that Arabs played in many countries as collaborators, et cetera, et cetera. But the role of Arab righteous opens the door to let people engage with the dark side of the story. If one only focused on the dark side, it would be very difficult, I think, for people to humanly engage one and another on this topic. So I think both are essential, and so I try to do both whenever I give this a talk about the topic. But I know that one of them helps others get into the topic. Okay.
Charles,
Should we-
before I start, I want to comment and then I will introduce the video. My comment to Robert. No, it's here. It's okay. I totally agree with you regarding anti-Semitism feelings or attitude and Holocaust denial because they are different in different countries. As you know, the anti-Semitism is related to pan-Arabism to some extent, right? So it's ideological and political. In terms of Gulf countries, they don't have this like strong feeling regarding anti-Semitism because they didn't experience it in the past. other countries like Egypt, Sham, or North Africa, maybe they have more feeling regarding this. So I think it's not constant regarding Arab countries' feeling regarding anti-Semitism. This is my comment. Dr. Muhammad is honored and delighted to be here with you guys, and he will deliver his speech as a video recording, and because it has a translation in Arabic and also translation in English, and he's apologized for any inconvenience.
Thank you. So I just want to say very briefly, Dr. Muhammad Al-Ali is the CEO and founder of Trends, the New Trends Research Center. It's one of the most important think tanks in the Middle East. He's published widely. He's an editor of many important academic journals. He's the editor-in-chief of scholarly periodicals and journals. He's he presents all over the world and well published, and we will hear his remarks now.
مش هاي الثانية. يكمل.
لا الثاني. لا.
No. Yeah.
For the other
This is anti-Semitism.
Yes. Yes. لا هذيك صغير short. This is the short.
Yeah. I just need to play and we'll see about it.
Okay, thank you.
السلام عليكم. شلوم علي خان. Peace be with you all. السيدات والسادة. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدني أن أعرب عن شكري وتقديري لمنظمي هذا البرنامج الأكاديمي لدعوتي للمشاركة في هذا المؤتمر تحت عنوان الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية بوصفها ركيزة لاحترام الآخر. أيها الحضور الكرام، إن الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية تعترف بوجود تراث مشترك بين الدول الموقعة عليها التي تمثل الدول التالية، وهي الولايات المتحدة ودولة الإمارات ومملكة البحرين ودولة إسرائيل والمملكة المغربية وجمهورية السودان. وهذا التراث المشترك هو مدخل إلى التفاعل بين دول الاتفاقيات وشعوبها والتعاون فيما بينها، وليس إلى التنافر والصراع. إن فكرة التراث الإبراهيمي المشترك بين الديانات السماوية الثلاث والحضارات البشرية التي تأسست عليها وفي ظلها هي فكرة مبدعة يمكن أن يبني عليها مشروع ثقافي أوسع بين شعوب الحضارتين العربية والإسلامية من جهة، وشعوب الحضارة اليهودية المسيحية من جهة أخرى. وهكذا فإن استنادا للاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية على التراث الإبراهيمي المشترك هو تعزيز للأخوة بين شعوب الدول الموقعة وتأكيد على التنوع الثقافي بينها، ويعترف التنوع الثقافي بوجود ثقافات متنوعة ومختلفة في المنطقة يحترم كل منها اختلافات الآخرين، وتجمعها الرغبة في العيش المشترك وتتفاعل تأثيرا وتأثرا فيما بينها. ويتضمن المفهوم كذلك الاعتراف بشرعية الثقافات الأخرى سواء في المجتمع أو الإقليم أو العالم. وتقدم أيضا هذه الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية في هذا الخصوص إسهاما مهما في الجدل السائد بين الدارسين والممارسين حول العلاقة بين الحضارات والثقافات المختلفة في العالم لمصلحة المدافعين عن التعددية الثقافية والداعين لاحترام التنوع الثقافي، وضد المروجين لصراع الثقافات والداعين إلى صدام الحضارات. ثمة جانب آخر أساسي للاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية وهو تعزيزها للتسامح بين شعوب المنطقة، ويستند نموذج التسامح الذي تسعى الاتفاقيات إلى تأسيسه إلى صد الكراهية ومكافحة التمييز بين البشر على أساس الدين أو العرق أو النوع أو اللون أو المواطنة، كما يستند أيضا إلى التعايش السلمي بين شعوب الإقليم وأعراقه المختلفة. وتطرح الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية منظورا جديدا للسلام يقوم على القبول بالآخر وضرورة تعايش الجميع من أجل تحقيق مصالح كل الشعوب واحترام حق الجميع في العيش بسلام والتطلع إلى التنمية المستدامة. وأيضا تطرح هذه الاتفاقيات مشروعا للتعاون الاستراتيجي في المنطقة ومنظورا تكامليا لإقليم الخليج والبحر المتوسط والبحر الأحمر والمحيط الهندي، مما شأنه إعادة هيكلة المنطقة وتشكيل العلاقة بين دوله وشعوبه، كما أن هذه الاتفاقيات تتجاوز العلاقة بين الحكومات إلى السلام وبين الشعوب والمجتمع المدني والقطاع الخاص في منطقتنا. وقبل ختام كلمتي بهذه المناسبة ثمة 3 دوائر يجدر التركيز عليها في المستقبل للاستفادة من الزخم الذي خلفته الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية من أجل تشكيل حقبة جديدة في الشرق الأوسط. أولها المنظور القاعدي للسلام الذي ينهض على تطوير العلاقات الاجتماعية والثقافية وتعزيز المشتركات القيمة بين شعوب المنطقة عبر الفعاليات الثقافية والاجتماعية والرياضية والسياحية المختلفة. ثانيا منظمات المجتمع المدني والشباب، حيث أن لهم دورا فعالا في نشر ثقافة قبول الآخر والتعامل الثقافي والتسامح الإنساني، ولعل منظمة شراكة وهي المنظمة التي أسسها شباب من دول الخليج وإسرائيل خير مثال على ذلك. ثالثا التسوية السلمية المستدامة التي تقوم على مد مظلة الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية لتشمل سائر دول وشعوب الإقليم وفي مقدمتهم الشعب الفلسطيني على أساس حل الدولتين وتوطيد العلاقات بين إسرائيل ودول عربية ضمن فهم جديد للمصالح المتبادلة ومواجهة التهديدات المشتركة، وبما يسهم في تحقيق تطلعات الشعوب في الاستقرار والتنمية المستدامة. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
a beautiful speech, important words.
Thank you so much.
And now I think we'll have some questions and Q&A. So if anybody has any comments or questions for Dr. Ali.
Charles, a word will translate.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Anybody like to ask a question or comment? Silent.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question to Dr. Muhammad Ali. You have mentioned that Abrahamic Accord will play a better role in solving the Palestinian cause. أنت حضرتك ذكرت أن الاتفاق الإبراهيمي سيلعب دور في حل القضية الفلسطينية. Will you explain to us more about that? How it can contribute in the solve the Palestinian cause, the whole cause in the region, and the main source for this instability during the last decades, اللي هي مصدر عدم الاستقرار في المنطقة التي استخدمت يعني لزعزعة الأمور لقلة العقود الماضية.
نحن دكتور رامي اعتقد ان نحن نفس ما ذكرنا اللي هو حل وجود دولتين. فنحن كمركز بحثي عملنا ريسيرش وعملنا ابحاث عن هذا الموضوع ووصلنا الى ان حل مثل ما تفضلت اللي هو الحل اللي العالم كله متفق عليه اللي هو الدولتين، وجود الدولتين. فاعتقد انه يعني هذا هو الحل الامثل. يعني الصراع هذا راح يعني ما له حل، صار له اكثر قرون وقرون ما في حل عنده الا حل اللي العالم كله متفق عليه اللي هو الدولتين.
Would you like to translate to the
Yeah, we believe in trends that the Abraham Accord should play a role on facilitating the peace process between the two countries, and we think that the Abraham Accord, if we utilize the benefits of Abraham Accord in that matter, I think it will bring fruits to that conflict.
Hello, thank you so much, and thank you for all the critical work you're doing, and thank you also to thank you as well. I just want to ask, on the streets of London in May 2021, there was a depiction of the leader of the UAE, which used rather traditional anti-Semitic stereotypes. So the leader of the UAE had large devil-like horns, devil-like claws, and all these other things that traditionally was associated with Jews. And I just wonder, do you think the Abraham Accords will contribute to fighting Islamic anti-Semitism within the streets within Europe, Or do you think actually perhaps these accords will exacerbate hostilities we are seeing today on the streets of the UK and beyond?
دكتور العلي he asking you that I'm sorry. هو بيسأل بالنسبة لاتفاقات إبراهيم ما هو الدور الذي يمكن أن تلعبه تلك الاتفاقات في مكافحة الخطاب الإسلامي المتطرف في الدول العربية فيما يخص نشر كراهية اليهود ومعاداة الساميين.
What he said.
He's joking.
نحن
شوية صوت.
نحن الاتفاقات الإبراهيمية نحن ليش العالم ما يعيش في تعايش وسلام يعني أعتقد الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية مثل ما ذكرنا في كامبريدج أن الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية تدعو إلى السلام إلى التعايش. فأعتقد أن نحن يعني ليش العالم دائما يكون في صراع في هذا الصراع الغير مؤثر يعني. فنحن نرى أن الاتفاقيات الإبراهيمية ستسهم بدور كبير أن العالم يعيش في سلام وتعايش. واعتقد انه يعني خلاص يعني نحن سئمنا من الحروب سئمنا من المعاداة وسئمنا من هذا. فالعالم عبارة عن قرية صغيرة فيجب أن يكون محب ومتعايش مع بعض البعض.
Doctor said that Abraham Accord is not a sign of a paper. It's also an idea.
Yes.
It's an invitation to accept others. If other people understand it in other ways, it's not our problem, right?
Yeah.
If they exaggerate conflict, to exaggerate hate speech, and etc., it's not the intent of the Abraham Accord itself. Abraham Accord is, as you know, it's an invitation of tolerance, of coexistence, etc. And if other countries or other societies believe otherwise, it's not the intent of Abraham Accord.
نعم. واعتقد ان الدول العربيه اصبحت الان تفكر في مصلحتها وان ليش تعادي الاخرين. فبدت تتخذ طبعا من الاتفاقيات الابراهيميه ان نكون يعني للسلام والتعايش the peace on يعني التعايش مع بعض.
And also the panel is the title of the panel is Abraham Accord as a vehicle of respecting the others.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lally, and also Rob for your fascinating and wonderful speeches. I just want to pick up on what Harry was saying. And I'm going to say something that some of you may think, what's he saying? Having been in Jeddah recently, in Saudi Arabia, and being in Abu Dhabi recently, and Dubai, right now I would say the opposite of what I've been saying for the last 15 years. And that is that London, parts of London, are more extremist, more anti-Semitic, more against our way of life than Abu Dhabi, Dubai and Jeddah. And I never thought I'd say that. I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. So my question is, and it started. So we won't, it's going to take a long time. I remember a meeting many years ago with somebody very senior that Katia yesterday said that we'd be surprised that we're actually praising it, and that's Dick Cheney. And he asked me and who I was with and said, how do we fix this problem? And we said, the way to fix the problem of extremism, it wasn't anti-Semitism, but that's part of it, is to fix the problem at the source. He wasn't talking about UAE, he was talking about Saudi Arabia at the time. That's what we said. I said it, I never thought it would happen. Right now, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and these countries are, UAE already have opened up this free market of ideas, reversed. Shias can do it's called Matam, can do that in Mecca, I've seen it. People like me can do Mawlid, singing of the praising of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in life. Couldn't do that before. What's going to take time is for the rest of the world to catch up, and that's us. The good news is that the delegation from Trends and other people are there. My question now is, what can we do to actually help further the good work that you've started? What can everybody here, what can we do?
صح. انا بس اريد ترجم لي الجواب. بعد توقيع الاتفاق الابراهيميه نحن في الامارات، يعني انا اتكلم كوني في يونايتد عرب اميريتس، كان في يمكن ايدي عبادي كان موجود. النظره تغيرت في الامارات على بالنسبه لوجود الاسرائيليين عندنا. انا كنت في الجلوبال فيليج، الاسرائيليين يتمشون معانا مثل اخواننا مثل اصدقائنا، خلاص يعني النظره تغيرت في العالم. يعني انا اعتقد ان العالم لازم يعيش في سلام وتعايش. ليش الحروب؟ ليش نحن ندخل؟ ليش نحن نكون طرف في حروب نحن لا نعتني فيها يعني؟
Dr. Ali said after Abrahamic Accord, he as Emirati talking about United Arab Emirates experiment in this field, the Emirates received a large number of Israelis. They can walk freely across the United Arab Emirates, and he had seen a lot of them. They are walking freely without any restriction, and he said that should to be the model of coexistence according to the Abrahamic Accord. Why we should to be in fight, especially he mentioned his country. Why we should to be in war? They are not part in it, referring to any clash between Arab countries and Israel. And as we said in our presentation, I'd like to add that, and what Rob Satloff said before, Emirates went through Abrahamic Accord, went through the road of peace, and despite she didn't get any war before, like what happened between Egypt and Jordan, for instance.
May I add?
Could you add? Oh, sorry.
So sorry, I would like to add, Trent also went to Israel after signing
Yes.
the Abraham Accord. So we did our first conference regarding the Abraham Accord with Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. And we have many partners in Israel, and we are continuing the good work. So
Rob, I'd be fascinated to know your thoughts on what can we be doing.
Well, I mean, this group is already off the charts in terms of being aware of these issues and being engaged on these issues, and so there's a few things. One, go back to your communities and educate and get people further engaged in the sorts of conversations that we're having here. And two, if you yourselves want to get engaged in this conversation, which is how you deal face to face with Arabs and Muslims, that's terrific. We all tend, not we all, many people tend to talk to people that are just like themselves. And, that's sort of interesting and useful and fun, but it doesn't really get you too far. So if you want to really make a difference, go talk to people who are very different than you.
So I would like.
No, go.
I would like.
No, go. After you.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to ask a question. So it's interesting in that, and maybe it's too early to say, but as the region shifts and moves away from extremism, there potentially is the possibility, and maybe we're beginning to witness the beginning of it, that extremists are moving to Turkey, even to Europe, and maybe even to the United States. So what is the danger of extremism being reinforced in the West, which is a very powerful part of the global strategic interest? And as Harris points out, there's already enclaves of extremism. Will this exacerbate and cause us further problems in the near future? So to Dr. Ali and to Dr. Satloff.
الموضوع عن المنطقة أقرب من التطرف، هل ده حماس التحدي للغرب يعني يفرض علينا أن احنا؟
أنا أعتقد الغرب لازم يسمع العرب، لازم يسمع الباحثين العرب، لازم يسمع المفكرين العرب، عشان يغير. الكثير من الباحثين العرب عندهم الكثير عن التطرف، نحن في ترندز البحوث والاستشارات عندنا إصدارات خاصة عن بعض القضايا المهمة اللي تهم الغرب والأوروبيين في هذا المجال. أتمنى أن يعني يكون يكثف العرب أو المثقفون العرب والباحثون العرب حضورهم في مثل هذه الندوات والمؤتمرات القريبة. نحن إن شاء الله راح نكون الشهر القادم في جرماني في ألمانيا أيضا مدعوين لمؤتمر كبير يتكلم عن الثقافة العربية والدبلوماسية الثقافية العربية والتغير اللي صاير في هذا الموضوع. فأعتقد أنه يجب يكون تبادل الخبرات بين الباحثين العرب والباحثين الأجانب في هذا المجال.
No, تفضل.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ali, according to Charles' question, said it's a time.
Ravi, people at the back can't hear you.
Yeah. Dr. Ali says that it's a time to the West listen to the Arab and get benefit from their experience about how it can counter extremism and terrorism in their own countries. And it's a time to exchange the experience between Arabic Research Center like Trends and the Western Research Center and listen more about the experience, how to counter terrorism in our extremist narrative in Arab countries. Exchange visit between academic and researcher is very important. So he mentioned to some activities they will be in Germany next month.
Yes.
Yeah.
Next month, and after that they have another conference in Israel and so on. So I think Dr. Ali mentioned that before in Cambridge. All of the people here in this room are invited to be engaged with our activities and Trends activities as well. Thank you so much.
So I'll just add a couple of things. We don't have to look for demons, Charles. We don't have to look for the dark side of this good news story. Point one. Point two, actually, we need to invest to make sure this good news story doesn't fall apart. It will not survive on its own, on its own steam. These sorts of things need continual investing and continual effort to maintain. I mean, you just even think about, at a lesser moment, think about the Egypt-Israel peace. Egypt-Israel peace in 79, 80, 81, there was much more human contact. The Israel Academic Center in Cairo was a flourishing institution. There were people going back and forth, much, much more. It went backwards. It went backwards. And that's just that example. Now we have multiple countries. We have to make sure that they stay, if not all at the same pace, but in the same direction. That's a real effort. About where they're, the locus, the centers of real problematic anti-Semitism in the Middle East, it still exists. I mean, Iran is still an engine producing all sorts of horrible stuff, and it has a soft power as well as hard power aspect, which is very effective in many countries, sadly so. And as you say, Turkey, very serious problems, and there are other problems in different. So I think we recognize what's good, invest in it, and then still focus on what's very problematic.
I think also doing research on the impact of the soft power of the Muslim Brotherhood in American universities, which is an astounding problem. The more we dig into it, the more shocking it all is. And this, I think, can have an impact on the good work that needs to be done to push things in the right direction. Okay. Dr. Abadi, Rabbi Abadi, very quickly, and then.
So Harris, if I may just try to attempt to answer your question. Education is extremely important, of course, in schooling, informal education to the teenager, to the youth, a one-to-one discussion, some sort of a rehabilitation of brainwashed extremists. All of those things are important. However, I think what is going to make the greatest difference is governmental intervention. And let me explain what that means. I was at a panel together with a high official of the Emirati government with American leaders. And the American leaders asked him, what can we do with extremist imams and extremist ideology being spread in mosques all over the West, United States and Europe? Do you have that problem, Your Excellency? As his answer said, we don't have that problem. We don't have the problem of extremists spewing hatred and incitement to kill and incitement to attack. We don't have that problem. You have that problem in the West. And unfortunately, the reason is, and now I'm speaking, the reason that you have that problem in the West is the definition of freedom of expression. Freedom of expression in the West goes ad absurdum, to the point of we are allowing people to express not just hatred, than incitement to kill, incitement to attack, disrespect, demonization, delegitimization, so on and so forth of other nationalities, of other religions, of other cultures. And I think until the West comes to the realization that freedom of expression is not all those things that I mentioned, freedom of expression gives you a responsibility. You could express yourself, but you need to respect your fellow resident or your fellow citizen, no matter if they're what religion they are, what nationality, what ethnicity, what color, race and creed, whatever, and so on and so forth. That is, I think, the key solution in the West. Otherwise, just plain education is not going to be enough.
It's a very important point. I'll just add something. I don't know if it's the West, because different countries in Europe, Canada, Israel have limitations on hate speech to some extent. Canada, I think, is an excellent model on limiting speech when you are inciting against an identifiable group of people or individuals. There's some law. In the United States, the First Amendment is a bigger challenge.
You mentioned about extremists going from country to country. Extremists will go only if they have safe haven.
If I could just please finish my point, and to give you an example, at Yale University we wanted to do a moot court. We wanted to put on trial Ahmadinejad and his incitement to genocide according to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. And we assembled all these great legal scholars at Yale University's law school. And the consensus among the professors at Yale was that the moot court should not happen because incitement to genocide only happens once the genocide occurs. That you have to incite to the point that when the genocide begins, that's when you can use the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, which stipulates incitement is a crime. That's how far free speech among these great legal scholars goes. I found it terrifying, but that's a whole other issue. So Ben, the final question. Harry already asked the question already. We'll try to bring you into the conversation.
So it's really, the sessions today, Rami, yours as well, are really hopeful. And this has been quite a depressing conference thus far, which is very standard when talking about Jew hatred. And really my question actually is about the relationships between Arab societies and Arab states, because we're showing incredible progress and partnership and evolution, but at the same time we're seeing even further radicalization, it seems, at least from those who support the Palestinians. And that might not be the Palestinians themselves. So just yesterday in New York City, people were chanting, we don't want no two states, we want all of it, we don't want the Zionists here, Palestine can only be opened by martyrs. I was wondering, what is the relationship between, in your speech you said 2 states. What we're seeing here, and maybe again it's not Palestinian leadership or people perhaps in Palestinian territory, but there are people who support that movement for self-determination who is actively working against these ideals. Is that going to have an impact between relations between, say, the UAE and then other? No. Okay. Never mind then.
The further away, the more extreme and radical people get. The less realistic, the less practical. It's easier to be extreme when you're 6,000 miles away. And so what people say in New York or on the streets of Berkeley will have no impact on this. Just one more sentence. What will have an impact on this is whether the people of the Emirates and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, whatever, feel as though they themselves are benefiting from the partnerships that they're building with Israel. If they are not benefiting, and if they feel that they're paying some price in some fashion, but are not benefiting, that will have a negative impact on this. But what happens in Berkeley and New York will have no impact on this.
But it's not just Berkeley and New York. I mean, we saw from Gaza, PIJ, what they're doing. It's contrary to a two-state solution. So could there be a distancing between, will people in the UAE get tired of calling for a two-state solution when there does not seem to be at least a total partner for peace? Because obviously, to create 2 states, you need to have 2 people, or 2 peoples wanting to create 2 states.
I think there are two separate like issues here. I'm talking now as a citizen of UAE. Um, um, Abraham Accord is the iceberg of all of this. We introduced women's rights, we introduced labor rights. You know, now women have more rights than us men, and also they are more than 50% representative in the government. So the Abraham Accord goes with this way of tolerance and coexistence. Although it has like the intent of the Abraham Accord to solve the issue, but this is, I think the UAE or the site of UAE think the Abraham Accord in terms of tolerance and coexistence, not a political like tool or something political at all. Yeah.
I'd like to add something quickly, if gentlemen allow to me. When you're talking about Arab societies, you have to take in your consideration which Arab societies you mean? In Egypt? Excuse me. North Africa? Or in Gulf states? Because I mentioned here 3 different types of Arab societies. So people in Gulf states less interest about politics, political issue. They also authorized their ruler to take a right decision on behalf of them. But in Egypt, every Egyptian citizen, he's a foreign minister. He would like to put a plan, take a decision. I'm talking seriously. That's not a joke here. So we are the most people talking about politics across the Middle East. You know what I mean? But North Africa, you can find only some voices in Algeria because they are backed by Iran. They have some interest. That's it. So.
Yeah,
The final word.
actually, you raise an important point in a certain respect. As long as the prospects for diplomatic negotiated solution are alive, then this can all happen. But if the common perception is that the prospect for a negotiated solution is dead, totally off the table, killed, either by one side, the other, or both of them in their own way, you know, like killing Brutus, their own way, like killing Caesar, in their own way stabbing from both sides, if it's dead, then this is in trouble. If it's really dead. So, I hope I'm not stepping on any toes here. If, you know, the Ben Gvir phenomenon in Israel combines with the success of Hamas in the Palestinian world, then this is in trouble. But as long as as the leadership at least maintains, whether it's real or even a bit of a fig leaf, but maintains the sense that a negotiated solution remains possible, this is okay.
Yeah.
So on this positive note, I want to thank everybody for your amazing contribution. So thank you, and we'll continue this evening with a special program. Natan Sharansky is here, and he's agreed to do a special session for 30 minutes instead of coffee. You're welcome to go for coffee, but Natan is going to do a special presentation on what's happening with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. So we're very honored that he's agreed to
I
do
thought it goes together with coffee.
coffee and conflict. So you want to take, okay, take 5 minutes, grab your coffee, and please come back quickly if you want to hear the time.